as we said initially, man, as we know him, as nature brings us, or God brings us to development when we become adult, is not a full, complete being. Nature grows us to a certain degree, but then we have the option to continue ourselves, the evolutionary process, completing of ourselves, the acorn, fruit, specialized knowledge and conscious effort, intentional suffering, conscious labor and intentional suffering, as Gertrude would call it. It kind of brings itself to become a little sapling and a little young, little oak, up to becoming a full oak tree. So that's what we're going to talk about. In the fourth way, there's this idea that there are different levels of men and women, of course, from the point of view of the development of their consciousness, so to say, but also from the development, expansion of their consciousness, as well as the development of their psychology, of the emotional life. And it's from the point of view of several parameters. In the fourth way, the parameters are the degree of one's wakefulness, so the state of consciousness. And we talked before, there are 4 states, and the usual ordinary man lives only in the first 2, waking sleep and the normal state where everybody is in. So from the point of view of consciousness, that's a parameter, and the wakefulness. Another parameter is from the point of view of unity. The ordinary man left not being complete doesn't have unity. Imagined he has unity. That's the thing. The man, as we see it on the street, man imagines all of these qualities that are actually just potential for him, like a wakefulness, unity, and meaning that there's just one in charge, as opposed to many random impulses, groups of eyes, contradictory parts and patterns. And the last parameter is the ability to have conscious will, or real ability to do, when initially everything is happening to men, everything is happening to us. So from this point of view, they are in the fourth way. And actually, there are other teachings. I found this described in different teachings, Indian or other things. Again, this level of stations on the mountain, so to say. And what is interesting here is that depending on that level of where a man's consciousness is, now this influences all his concepts and his everything. So, and to get into it, there's like a man number 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7. These are the 7 levels of men, from 1 to 7. No Sanskrit terms, very simple, straightforward. And what's important to what's said in the fourth way is that concepts like love, or truth, or friendship, or sex, or the world, all of this, they mean very different things for people, depending on their level of consciousness where they're at. So it can be a love number 1, a love number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they are very different from each other. The same with the idea of truth, the same with the idea of any idea. So there's this scale at which all of these concepts and things are being perceived depending on where we are at. And yeah, do you want to say something here, Peter, before we actually go into 1, 2, and 3?
No, thank you.
So everybody that comes here on the planet, according to the fourth way and through one's observation, can either be man number 1, 2, or 3. So we all start here. This would be the conscious man or the mechanical man that or woman, that lives just in the 2 lower states. It's the level of consciousness where there's no the passenger in the carriage is totally absent or totally asleep. The driver is drunk, and everything, basically every passerby can become in charge for a few minutes or so. So that's the level that consciousness is submerged into the many eyes. Every thought, feeling, sensation, desire, dislike, reaction takes the form of I, me, and at this level we are not aware that there's just a part, and consciousness or presence, that which is aware, is pulsating at a very low level. I mean, it's still there, but it is dormant, as if it's not there. Also, men number 1, 2, and 3, since there is no overseeing presence or overseeing something that is consciously there while all the other parts are happening, it doesn't have the ability to actually do or hold the direction or to so it's like a ship without the rudder, without even being aware. Being a ship without the rudder. So we all start here, and the difference between 1, 2, and 3, it's a little bit more like a type of trims that we have in the cars these days. But none of them actually is better than the other. So man number 1, this is connecting with the type of machine we have received. Man number 1 is a man whose center of gravity, where the sense of identity, or is in the moving instinctive center, moving or instinctive center. So a moving centered machine or instinctively centered machine, it's a man number 1. Man number 2 is where the center of gravity or the sense of identity and the sense of feeling most at home, which influences the psychology and the observation and what's important in our life, the values. Then number 2 is the emotionally centered machine. And then number 3 is intellectually centered machine. The sense of center of gravity or identity is more like concepts, in abstract thought, in this kind of stuff. The emotional is more like the feelings, they are more predominant, and all the things connected to feelings, like relational and connection, maybe art and beauty. But all of these 3 types of men, none of them is better than the other from the point of view of awakening. None of them is more favored. Although in the ego's delusion, we are feeling, instinctively centered person will find other machines like they're not grounded and they're airy fairy, and an emotional centered machine can feel oneself as being more sophisticated and emotionally intelligent, and maybe they are, but they are, it's a lack of balance at other levels. So this is, I guess, why they're like that, we don't know, but it makes sense for diversity, for survival of the species, for the whole humanity as a whole. It's useful to have moving centered, student centered, and intellectual centered. So there is this versatility of the humankind. Men number 1, 2, and 3 are equally mechanical, equally asleep. and usually they tend to resonate with like-minded people, like the moving and stimulus-centered people. They are more like feeling more comfortable with other moving-centered people, stimulus-centered, because it's like feels more familiar. We speak the same language, you know. Emotion-centered people, they tend to relate to each other, and I guess the same may apply to intellectual-centered people. Thank you, Peter.
Yes, I was just trying to think what else to say. Yes, we could say too that depending on a person's center of gravity, along the lines of what Mihai was describing, we feel conscious in our center of gravity. And so we mistake this for consciousness most of the time. And this is why so many people in humanity are not interested. There's no, what do you mean this conscious? Of course I'm conscious, and there's nothing higher, and life is about life here on earth, and me, and accomplishing things, and feeling certain ways, and understanding. And that's it. That's as far as the interest goes. But again, this idea that a person who's instinctive or moving centered will feel very sense of pride, almost sense of confidence in the accomplishments of their body, their physical body. And often also in a lot of confidence in the appearance of their physical body. Whereas people who are emotionally centered may feel quite confident in their emotional perceptivity, their understanding of other people, the importance of compassion. They don't understand why everybody doesn't have this. Why aren't you so, don't you feel this? Well, no, the other centers of gravity do not feel that. They do not. And that's not a bad thing. That's just the way it is. And similarly with people intellectually centered, the scientists, the mathematicians, the innovators in business and things like that, sometimes politicians, they're thinking about concepts and laws and rules and systems and organizational theories and all of this, and they're not feeling people, and they're not even interested in exercise. They are in their head, and this is how they operate. And as Mihai said, this is actually a good thing, because countries, cultures, humanity operates the way it does as a full body, you could say. You could even say that humanity on Earth has an instinctive moving center, an emotional center, and an intellectual center. And it comprises these people, all these people of these different centers of gravity. But back to the main point, and we can talk more about center of gravity, and we will, because it is an important topic. But in the context of what we're trying to introduce is this idea that on the level of what's possible in terms of consciousness, men, women, people number 1, 2, and 3, as the fourth way calls them, are their idea of things is on a certain level. Like Mihai mentioned love. Well, there can be love in the form of sentimentality. There can be love in the feeling of a sense of almost human loyalty. There can be love in the sense of compassion and empathy. There can be love to the degree that relates to consciousness, actually appreciating, loving, being grateful for consciousness in one another. And this is a perception, but it can be felt in the emotional center. It's a much deeper form of love, if you want to use that word. So that's just one example. The idea of art. What is art? Art can be seen in different ways by men number 1, 2, and 3 versus art that derives from a conscious source, conscious awareness, conscious perception. But again, that men number 1, 2, and 3 they have no interest, or they have very little interest, or they have passing interest in the idea of awakening, the idea of enlightenment, of self-realization, of feeling that they don't feel that something's missing in themselves. It's something's not quite complete. I'm not quite in touch with something in myself. I know it's there. They don't have this. And in the fourth way, this is called having a magnetic center, where through our experiences as men number 1, 2, and 3, we read, we suffer, we have experiences, we get exposed to knowledge, and we start garnering an appetite, an interest in this idea of something higher. And this is what leads us to what the fourth way calls man number 4 or woman number 4. Mihai, you want to start there?
Yes. And I wanted to say that people 1, 2, or 3, they all have the centers. They all have all the centers. There's equal opportunity. It's just that level 1, 2, or 3, one's development is lopsided. So one aspect of the house, one department of the house is more developed than the other ones, and the other ones are left neglected. Yeah. So men number 4. Also, I want to say that all the teachers, all the teachings, all the masters that we studied, all of them were initially either moving centered, intellectual centered, emotional centered, instinctively centered, you know. And from one angle, their teachings, the ones that reach the higher level of being, although they reach the same level of being, their form of the teaching might be influenced by their center of gravity. So the teaching may have a particular flavor. Some teachings, they have some movements or kinetic activities into it. Some other things, they have emotional aspects to it. Some other aspects of some other teachings are deeply cerebral and intellectual. So men number 4 is a product of conscious work, or men, woman number 4 doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It's a product of conscious development. It's a product of having had this magnetic center, the part in us that is seeking higher knowledge, seeking the truth. There's this feels this sense of lack, something is missing, something is not quite right. And then this magnetic center is trying to find the source of some higher knowledge. Yeah, this is the seeker. And this seeker is really mature in us, and it discerns between bullshit knowledge to higher knowledge, and gets stronger and stronger by reading information, you know, YouTube information, teachers, groups, things like that. So this part in us that is interested in something higher grows. We are still men number 1, 2, and 3 at this level, but we have a seeking principle, and this magnetic center's function is we are like following the scent of the higher knowledge, and then it brings us closer and closer. You know, Gurdjieff, when he was young, he just went all over the world trying to find the knowledge, the secret knowledge of the mystics, and Uspensky also all over the world in times were hard and no airplanes, nothing like that. I ended up in America because of this, because I was looking to find this or that. So now this magnetic center, it gets stronger and stronger. It is designed to find some higher teaching, and is designed to find a teacher or a system or a monastery or something, ashram. And then it recognizes like, whoa, this is what I've been looking for. And it's like a intellectual, emotional recognition of a fire in the heart of, this is it. This I've been looking for this all my life. So then this magnetic center is designed now to stop seeking, keep looking all over again, but try now to apply oneself to conscious work, to work on oneself. So coming back to and I think this applies to all paths, you know, this men number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7. I can see that it applies to all paths. It doesn't have to be fourth way, which is beautiful. So men number 4 is somebody who has sought for some time and now has found something and started to work on oneself, working with this, understanding these ideas, applying these ideas. And this has been happening for quite some time. So it's not just right away. So one has to have been devoted to understanding and applying this and making conscious effort in a sustained way for quite some time. Where the number 4 is that the priorities have changed now. Yes, you can have a family, you can have children, you can still run a company, but the most important thing is my conscious evolution. And so it's not just philosophy, like one is engaging in that. The man number 4 is somebody who, due to conscious inner work, they are in fourth way, observing themselves much more. They are much more aware of their eyes, and they are aware of different
You
sub
crazy
parts.
horsey.
I forgot how to mute people, but Shelley, if you can mute.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I had an emergency.
Yeah, no problem. So basically, one's life is dedicated to self-remembering, to self-observation, to applying the teaching, and this has been happening for some time. Work has become a priority, and there are already changes in one's inner psychology. There's much more knowing of oneself as knowing the false self, knowing the false personality, knowing one's essence. There is some ability to observe now. There is a consciousness got more conscious and is knows the stuff rather than being identified all the time and lost in daydreaming. There is some aspect of the sense of a person, of Mihai, trying to wake up. Yeah, and Mihai trying to make efforts and more constant efforts. Man number 4 also has degrees, so it can be like a young man number 4 and a mature man number 4. Another aspect of the people number 4 is that they are more balanced, especially in the fourth way work. We are supposed to, part of the work is to become more conscious. We work with all the centers, and so we correct some wrong work of centers, so the machine gets more balanced. So although we may initially be stimulus centered or intellectual centered, now there is more knowledge and higher functioning of all centers. So one is being less lopsided. One still retains one's center of gravity, as a chihuahua is a chihuahua, no matter how much they work on themselves, they're still a chihuahua. But it seems like the center of gravity now is in the work.
Also, this idea of center of gravity is interesting. It's distinct to the fourth way. Because someone who's centered in one center may come to the idea of awareness, even to the idea of self-remembering, without knowing about the 4 centers, can mistake one of the other centers now as consciousness. And so this distinction of our 4 centers and realizing we have a center of gravity in one of them helps us clarify in a fundamental way what consciousness is not. And we not only do our centers become more balanced through this system and applying these ideas and observing through these lenses of the fourth way, we become more balanced, but we also come to a more complete, a more comprehensive understanding of what consciousness itself, awareness, is not. Mm-hmm.
Anything else on becoming a people number 4.
Yes, I think man number 4, and particularly in terms of the fourth way, is the idea of knowledge. There is, now we're turning away from ordinary knowledge, what you could call ordinary knowledge in the world that we learn in education and in business and things. And now it's very specific. And here's Ouspensky's The Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution, which, by the way, is a comprehensive overview of the entire main ideas of the system. And now man number 4, woman number 4 is starting to concentrate on the study of this knowledge and recognizing this knowledge is at a level above. It has to do with a completely different subject matter, completely different purpose related to existence. And so it's a more precise knowledge and theoretically a knowledge that was not invented by ordinary people, meaning men number 1, 2, and 3 who came up with some clever concept about enlightenment or awakening, but rather it's a system of knowledge, a body of knowledge that was derived from those who broke through, you could say, to a higher level of consciousness. And then as a result of their efforts, they translated their perceptions, you could say, from that higher level of consciousness and awareness into a system of thought or a teaching that could be comprehended by the lower centers and then studied and approached through the lower centers in order to reach, like climbing up a ladder, climbing up the mountain, following very specific instructions, instead of just circling the mountain over and over again at low plateaus. And so it's the fourth way is a study of knowledge also. And that's what a man number 4 does, is woman number 4 becomes more and more adept at putting all the pieces of this knowledge together in such a way that it supports and it reinforces what we started this meeting today with, which is the whole idea of presence and the deepening of this simple consciousness of awareness. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's giving goosebumps because although I was very young, there was a very clear, like, although I read books all my life, and I was into books, as soon as I encountered the system, actually, as soon as I encountered even not fourth way, but like higher knowledge, Osho and other things, there was a distinct losing of interest of fiction, of any kind of fiction. And there was an obsession on this fourth way books or things like that, which is like very touching. I mean, I'm grateful for that aspect. And I know that some of you and many of you here, you know what I'm talking about when all of this, whatever knowledge becomes clearly seen as meaningless in some way, can be entertaining, can be high quality literature, but it's not about awakening, or it's not about soul.
And this relates to the idea of levels of men too, Mihai, if I may just briefly say that knowledge for men number 1, instinctive moving types, would be things, even the knowledge of carpentry or masonry, and also very sophisticated engineering and architecture. This is the knowledge of men number 1. Very useful and necessary in its own place, not at all connected to consciousness, awareness, awakening. Men number 2, emotionally centered people, knowledge of the arts, knowledge of even certain aspects of emotional psychology in relationships between human beings. Wonderful, a broad spectrum of subjects and knowledge in this realm, but again, not at all related to consciousness. And men number 3, these are the mathematicians, the scientists, as I said earlier, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, not all entrepreneurs are intellectually centered, but you get the idea that even the most sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, biology, the medical sciences, this is just, and here's another thing the fourth way says is all of these examples I just mentioned are of the same level of merit or value. the most sophisticated mathematician in the world is not necessarily of a higher level of being in terms of consciousness than someone who knows how to make a very, very, very good cup of coffee. It's the same, because the level of being is the same. Their knowledge may vary in different areas, but their level of being, their level of consciousness is the same. And the idea with man number 4, woman number 4, is that now with this pursuit of higher knowledge, it's an attempt to climb up above the realm of so-called ordinary knowledge. And you're now becoming a student of consciousness, not a student of the world. And actually, before becoming a student of consciousness, we're becoming a student of the psychology, which inhibits our consciousness, which is we mistake for consciousness. And then we're going to talk about higher levels of men and women than number 4, where it's now a study of it's a study of awareness itself, you could say. It's awareness studying itself. Now, this is getting farther ahead than we need to talk about now, but it's just to point out that level of being, when level of being ascends, level of knowledge ascends accordingly. Level of understanding ascends accordingly. And it's very different. This is why sometimes too, it's hard to talk to your friends about what we're talking about, because they're not interested. They're men 1, 2, and 3. It's not bad. We're not better. We're not superior. They just are not interested in talking in this way, and they'll think you're, what are you saying, Peter? There you go again, Peter, talking about all that awakening stuff. And they don't want to hear it, and they're not interested. And so that's the beauty of us being together. It's so, and this is the idea of a school or a group in the fourth way, is we spend time with one another. We reinforce this interest, this knowledge, and this pursuit. We help each other. I think you already know from these sessions, I don't know about you, but every Saturday, the last 3, I think this is the 4th one we're doing. I go away from these sessions with such a good, the rest of my day is quite rich as a result. There's a powerful lingering effect that is created by virtue of spending time with other people of like mind and like interest. And that's also a characteristic of, now you can experience this in your church too, granted. You can go to church and you can feel wonderful, you can be with your people, or your hobby club, your chess club, your reading club, whatever it is. But I think it's a different quality. There's a different quality. And what that is because us coming together and talking like this, it piques awareness, it piques consciousness. And then that lingers. And that's not an emotion, that's not a thought, that's not a sensation. Now there's this, it's like a perfume. And now it's sort of around us for a while, maybe a few hours, maybe a few days. Mihai?
Yeah, Gurdjieff had a term for that he liked a lot, is that we are being vivified. Consciousness
Being what?
is vivified.
Vivified.
Vivified,
Mm-hmm.
vivified. And actually we'll talk later, but part of, let's say, fourth way schoolwork is to have 3 lines of work. So by us having these meetings and together, it's not just personal work of study and trying to apply by oneself, which is paramount, but there's the working with others as well as teaching, so there are more elements that fuel the furnace of our inner work. So as we are still with men number 4, I would say that men number 4, usually there's this idea in the fourth way that our knowledge precedes our being with a few years. So we can have, as a mature man number 4, or can have deep understanding of consciousness or deep understanding of the machine and this or that, but the application of it is lagging behind. However, man number 4, there is already there's already an observing eye formed. These are, don't take it as like, oh, there's an observing eye. These are stages of the sobering of our true nature. Yeah. So in the fourth way, they go through these different stages. That first, there's just many eyes all over the place. Nobody was watching. Then, for the application of this work, then there starts to be an observing part that is observing other parts. But when the other potatoes are hot, it goes out. Like the candle is tiny at the beginning and is a stronger gust of wind, like a reaction, identification, a desire, negativity, then the light of witnessing is out. So anyway, there's the observing guy, and then they call it the deputy steward, which is like some groups of my group or part of myself that is really interested in the work and getting stronger and stronger and putting a little order in the factory and keeps somehow the direction for some time. Although, again, if the wind of passions or emotions or adversity are strong, then that is also snuffed out. This one persists, then they say the steward is formed, which is a personality in us, a personality in Mihai that is really steeped in these ideas and is trying to apply it all the time. And the steward is actually, it's some kind of something within our mind that reminds us to focus and apply these ideas. And the steward is a more advanced stage of the sobering of our true nature, but still at the level of, it doesn't quite know itself. It's still like me, Jimmy, I'm working on this. Yeah, me trying to reach awakening, or me trying to be conscious. But the steward level is there's more, this part of oneself is there more often, and then knows all the other parts, and already has some ability to not identify with certain things, not to go along with certain things. It's almost like the steward in a house. These terms of observing guy, deputy steward, steward. The steward is doing the work of the master. Master is being our conscious presence. So the steward is putting order in the house, in the factory, while the master is not there because it's too chaotic. So I would say, and Peter, if you can confirm or infirm, like man number 4 has this level of the steward on. However, on it's the steward is on somehow this stage, I guess. So I realize it doesn't matter. It's just words at this point about this.
But it's a good these levels are so useful. And by the way, you can read about these in the books we've recommended. One is called In Search of the Miraculous. I don't think he talks about this. Maybe he does in the psychology. I can't remember, Mihai. But there's another book.
Maybe in the fourth way.
In the fourth way, another book, which is Talks and Answers by Uspensky, The Fourth Way. He elaborates on this in detail. And now that you've heard us talking about this, I'm sure when you go to those books and read, a lot will sink in a lot faster and more meaningful, since we've introduced it and talked about it. If you weren't already familiar with this idea of different levels of being, different levels of man. But yes, so this idea of observing magnetic center, transforming, you could say, accumulating enough that it becomes observing eye, then observing eye maturing and accumulating within us to the degree that now you could say there's a deputy steward, at least somebody's, cleaning the basement of the house. And then a steward who's managing the entire household. That it's an analogy. Bear this in mind. This is just an analogy. There are other analogies we could use, but this is one. And now the house is coming into order. It's what we talked about, balance between centers. And there's a part of us that's orchestrating this, that's responsible, accountable, manageable, and and knows itself, you could say, but it's part of our, it's primarily usually in our intellectual or emotional center, or the higher parts of attention. You could also say in all of our centers, there's a recognition of wanting to be more attentive, wanting to be more present, wanting to be more watchful of the hot potatoes and even the ordinary thoughts. And you could even say that these parts of ourselves are being enabled by the master, the consciousness, who is not visible yet to the rest of the household, will never be, in fact, but is not manifesting fully yet. And so it's sort of, it's like the idea of meditation. What we're doing in meditation is we're giving consciousness a chance to breathe on its own. And these are, the same is true of yoga, or the same is true of certain kinds of dance or prayer. These are the different centers bringing their attention, the deputy steward and the steward orchestrating the centers in such a way that they sort of get out of the way and give awareness a chance to realize itself and to breathe on its own, as I like to say. But I just want to say too, this is just an analogy. There are other ones we could use, but it's a valuable way to think about different levels of a man number 4. There are many different levels, gradations, levels of maturity, understanding, being for a man number 4.
So man number 4 will have some kind of will in a way that it remembers about the work, remembers about being present, about self-observation, and about a lot of other things we haven't taught here. And remembers early in the morning, and then it reads something to inspire oneself, listens some YouTube, maybe has a meditation practice or some self-remembering practice, and then is eagerly wants to meet with other people to talk about these things. And there is a direction, although it doesn't seem like, one can still be somehow tortured by things, and the mind is still active and all kind of things, but there is just a steady direction towards awakening, that is, and now is already, this is the priority in my life, priority. This is what I want. Everything else doesn't matter, although is the 4th way we are in life, so we have to take care of like money and the children and all of that. And they could be, a man number 4 may have like, oh, I had this state, it was wonderful, and there's like, oh, and then I lost it. Oh, there's this, I got it, I lost it, kind of thing. There has had the experiences of higher states of consciousness. There's been glimpses or frequent glimpses of the 3rd state of consciousness, as being consciousness, being more present there. And so that's already shifts. There are serious shifts, and one is constantly flickering, stronger light, stronger like a light. It's like it's happening actively, because we are interested in it,
And you could
From one
say
angle, that's
that
what
I was going to say, we could say that a man number 4 is more and more consistently and more often thinking in terms of awakening and presence. And then as a result of, for example, some of the exercises we've been recommending, there come these moments, these flashes of being there, like Erica described at the beginning today. Suddenly she was there, she saw her granddaughter. She saw the spoon, which she had never seen before, the insignia of the heart on the handle of the spoon. But then right away, thought came in and tried to displace that and said, oh, maybe this is the practice. And so man number 4 is thinking more and more and more and trying to live more and more in accordance with these ideas. And then as a result, starts having more short moments of presence where there's this realization of awareness is not the mind, it's not the intellect, it's not the emotions, it's not the sensations and movements. And the idea is that this work is meant to help bring about more and more frequent flashes of that, as Mihai is saying, the flame, the light flickering, flashing, flashing, and until they start to become more frequent. And you can see from this idea that obviously the more frequent they become, at a certain point, there would be enough accumulation that now the light would stay on. Awareness would stay there, perhaps now for a minute. That may sound like nothing. That's a lot for most people, for pure awareness to be there knowingly, beyond the mind, you could say, knowingly for a minute or 2 minutes, and then going beyond that and going, to a half hour or an hour, and so on. This would represent gradually higher and higher levels of being that we're also going to talk about. But I'm thinking, did you want to finish your thought, Mihai?
Yeah,
And then maybe
yes.
Mhm.
One last idea. Level number 4, I would say that it's the sense of identity is as being a dedicated, seasoned practitioner, seeker of truth and practitioner of truth. It's still the sense of identity is being a separate individual. In non-duality, they talk about this sense of separation, and then as awakening, it's like the glimpses that the sense of oneself is impersonal presence, which is not separate. So there's still this belief of me practicing, and a felt sense of me practicing. One last thing, if somebody, well, how long will it take me? How long will it take me to become a number 4? This depends how serious you are about it. So I would say years to become a serious man number 4, seasoned, months or years, and the maturing of the man number 4 cookie, years. So let's go to woman number 5. Well, I haven't thought about these terms for quite some time, but I more recently, because I abandoned the 4th way and I went other teachings, and now I came back to 4th way, and I haven't quite thoroughly brushed up on the theory, but that's why Peter is here. So man number 5, he said that there is this self-remembering is happening somehow and lives more predominantly in the 3rd state, when consciousness is aware of what's happening, as well as conscious of the sense of being. There is much more of that. There's some kind of shift, could be gradual, or could be more perceptible suddenly, or gradual. I would say more gradual, that now there is a distinct shift of identity. So it's very clear that I am not the thoughts. I'm not the thoughts. Obviously, thoughts come and go. I'm not the emotions, even if they sometimes hijack me. But it's like, whoa, passes. And so I am not the desires. I'm not the feeling. The sense of I is as that which is aware. And there is a sense that this which is aware right now is not person. It's not a personal awareness, little male, European, white, Romanian awareness. It's just that's the presence. The presence is the I. So somehow in the 4th way will be that's the real I emerged. So the real I, which was there all along dormant, now popped out of its sleep and is aware of its own existence, as well as aware of all the subpersonalities and the patterns and the emotions that one still has patterns and emotions. There's this ability to no longer be hijacked and stormed by unpleasant emotions, and to his ability to be with them and actually use their heat of their energy, not to become the emotion. So it's very clear, I am that which is aware of the emotion. Yeah, it's very unpleasant, but staying as, and so transmuting the fuel of unpleasant emotion for more presence. There is the idea that there is there's a real I now in place, and there is knowledge of oneself as both the false self of the Mihai, and as well as the true self. I ran out of.
I was thinking of what Marcia said more than an hour ago, 2 hours ago in the beginning, when she felt that she could see, she not only saw the topic of her identification that she used for the week, at a certain point also there was something that saw Marcia more objectively, almost like standing right behind Marcia, or could see Marcia, was not so immersed in Marcia. And that would be true for all of us, and that this corresponds more to the third state of consciousness, which is the parallel with the idea of a man number 5. So man number 1, 2, and 3, using the idea of self-remembering, what I was describing there with Marcia, that would be a very good example of self-remembering, real self-remembering in the fourth way, not thinking about it, not trying to be present, but suddenly a presence being there. So men number 1, 2, and 3 are not, they don't know about, they're not interested in, and they're not trying to remember themselves in this way. Men number 4 knows about this, has this concept, and is very interested in, as Mihai said, is a seeker, is trying, and is more and more and more dedicated to this. But it's still thinking about it. It's still Marcia trying to remember herself. I hope you don't mind me using you as an example, Marcia. Or Peter. It's more Peter trying to remember himself, as opposed to real self-remembering, the self-remembering of consciousness itself, seeing Peter, even in a moment, trying to remember himself, seeing Peter struggling with fear, seeing Peter struggling with some topic of identification, and realizing itself. As Mihai said, Peter doesn't, what did you say, Mihai, that you were using yourself as an example, and you said, Mihai trying to be consciousness, or anyhow, it's consciousness.
The identity is shifting from being someone, remembering oneself. It's clear the identity is the aware being.
Yes, and so it's this, and it comes back though to this idea we've talked about before, just trying to be here and realize you're here, and realize you're realizing that. This is such a stable foundation always. I'm here, I'm realizing I'm here. Without these words saying this, that's the intellect, saying it, but it's what it's meant to represent. And you see, it really is wordless. That's why we have these moments of silence too. We're trying to talk about something that's beyond words, beyond description, even with our best analogies. It's this presence, this silent, wordless realization of awareness. And it's not Peter aware of awareness. It's consciousness itself realizing itself. This is why it said that it's so simple, but it's so hard to realize because we're approaching it from the bottom up, from the inside out. But sometimes we pop out like Erica did when she saw the spoon, or when Marcia saw Marcia. Something saw Marcia. It wasn't even Marcia seeing Marcia. There was this realization. It came with relief, and it was silent, and it was unattached. It was unidentified. It was free. That's why it's called liberation in the East. Awareness is now free of its attachment to the four centers. And these are moments where you've been trying, you've tried for weeks or months or years, you're trying to be more present. And then suddenly awareness is free even of that. And, but this doesn't just come by itself by thinking about it.
Yeah, what comes to me is that awareness is more free of the belief and the felt sense of being a person, of being a woman, being a man. Awareness is more breathing, is being there knowingly. Awareness is always there in the form of the seeker, in the form of the practitioner. No, it's always our true nature is animating this, the spirit, but the spirit was in a low, dim state.
It doesn't
So,
realize it's here. Yes, it's always here. This is where the fourth way and the other Eastern teachings coincide so nicely. The fourth way teaches, no, you have to develop this. And that's a misnomer. This true nature, as it's called, this awareness, this consciousness, is always here. It is oblivious to itself being here as simply consciousness. And it gets experienced as movement, sensation, thought, emotion, other people, events, career, culture, and so on and so forth. And then what we're talking about is this true nature, this invisible, wordless awareness, realizing it is here. And it is the same in each of us. It doesn't become a distinct identity of its own. It's not a new identity in us. It's not a sense, as Mihai said, it's not a felt sense of I.
And as the being is more free of the sense of the person, now the person is more free to be itself too. I mean, one is more in essence somehow, because it doesn't have all this, well, what they think of me, I have to be nice, or I'm not good enough, and like what they say, oh, it's not okay to be like this. This is all false personality ruling the show in the second state. But in the third state, then there's much less false personality, and essence is like a child. Like essence doesn't give a shit. But now there is presence with essence that doesn't give a shit, but still being careful, not to deal with the world. And here in Asia, man, they are very strong with the rules, man. Oh my God, everybody lines up. They are so good at lining up. Everybody's lining up, and everybody's like very well, works very well. So my ego, I guess, is like has authority issues and all that. so I'm like, whoa, okay. Anyway, so
yes, because I want to point out that consciousness itself, there is no attitude of I don't give a shit. There is no attitude at all. There's no identification, and hence there's no identity as we usually experience it. But it doesn't mean you don't care. It means you see things as they are. You see, and it's perfectly fine even for Mihai to be in Singapore and get in line. From the point of view of consciousness, that's perfectly fine. No problem.
So whether we could even stop here with this, but we will just talk briefly about men number 6 and men number 7. Gurdjieff wouldn't even want to talk much about it because, if we are men number 1, 2, and 3, it's what's very relevant is to how to become man number 4. Or if we're man number 4, which is actually very pretty advanced, what's relevant is to how to become man number 5. So talking about man number 6 and man number 7 is kind of imagination creating. But, so from one angle, from man number 5 is like awakening. There's some awakening happened. And then there are several other stages that one keeps going. And this more like, it's almost like a younger, like a solid tree, oak tree now has to go through more stages to become an old, large oak tree. And it's an oak tree, but it's different than a young oak tree, so to say. And here has to do with also as the third state becomes more constant, and the state of consciousness being awake to itself, or self-remembering, or self-abiding, that's happening more often. So this can get more often, and then that then can expand even more into the fourth state. You want to talk about this, Peter?
I would just say that, again, going back to this idea, the Marcia example of the third state, what would correspond with the level of being of a man number 5 who operated like that more and more and more consistently, is that of awareness seeing Peter objectively. And the idea behind the fourth state is that now this same awareness would see all of humanity the same way. It would be able to see other people with that same objectivity, would not be identified with other people, with their actions, with their negativity, with their unpleasant emotions, with their topics of identification, because it would not be attached to that either. It would see that for what it is, as it is, without losing itself, being persuaded by all of that to be seemingly real, to be seemingly valid. All these people with all these senses of identity would be seen through the same way we would see through our own sense of identity that we'd carried with us for so many years, that suddenly we see was I like to think of it as a hologram. We have this imaginary idea of ourselves inside, this sense of me. So the fourth state would be, more corresponding to seeing things as they are, and you can think of it simply on the level of humanity, looking at the world and no longer seeing problems as problems, seeing situations as the reality of life on earth and not being identified with it, not having opinions and attitudes and wants and fears and desires, seeing it operate. It's operating as it is operating. And it's possible to witness all of that from a higher level of consciousness. But now we're talking, this is just the theory, this is just how the fourth way presents it, but it gives the mind, it can give your mind, your intellect, and your emotions, and even your moving center, a way to try to comprehend these distinctions. We're going back again to this idea of degrees of level of being. Men number 1, 2, and 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6, and consciousness becoming gradually, first of all, us learning about it, and then consciousness itself becoming gradually more established as itself in itself. And then, as Mihai used the analogy of an oak tree, a maturing tree growing and becoming larger and stronger, more stable, more able to withstand the onslaughts of nature. And in our case, able to withstand the onslaughts of very unpleasant emotions that may surface in us, or suffering that may come to us in our life, and not be knocked over by it, but for consciousness to be able to remain, as Mihai, I like this term, self-abiding. But again, it's, well, it's easy to be in imagination about this. It's even easy to be in imagination about consciousness on the level of man number 5 becoming more and more and more permanent. However, the examples we talked about today demonstrate it is possible. And it demonstrates that you can discern in yourself the distinction, as Erica did, as Marcia did in those moments they talked about. These are the gems of our existence, these kind of moments. They really are the gems, the real deal. It's the real you, which is not you as an identity, but it's the real true nature that there's nothing compares to this true nature of ourselves, this consciousness in us realizing itself, even in the simplest way for a short amount of time. Treasure it. And this is something else about a man number 4, has the discernment to appreciate this and to treasure these moments and to long for them coming again.
Just to say something here, that there's teachings that are very powerful, and we are reading them as men number 1, 2, or 3, or 4. But they come, it's from men number 7. And so statements like, so, that's what reality would look like from the 4th state. Statements like, emptiness is form, form is emptiness. Statements like, I and the Father are one. Statements like the Sufi or the Quran, wherever your eyes fall, there is the face of God. Statements like, all is well and unfolding perfectly as it should. Although, they are now women tortured and raped, and the caskets are coming, and people are suffering. All is well and unfolding as it should. And this witnessing presence and the hands moving and the airport and the computer are all expression of one reality. It's all one. So those kind of stuff are coming from the 4th state, where one is not just aware of the sense of being aware as oneself, but somehow seeing the laws. Gurdjieff will keep it very simple, like this: you see the laws of the universe and see reality as it is.